he said to me, I don't believe in reports. I don't believe in anything I can't see for myself.
It seems we have an admission from Michael Ma that he doesn't believe in forced labor in China. Just when Michael Ma thought his forced labor controversy would just fade away, it starts to get worse. After he attacked a Canadian expert yesterday, Chinese state-linked media started praising his line of questioning, while Ma issued a quote-unquote apology blaming everybody else for misunderstanding him. And at the same time, Mark Carney today is pushing even deeper trade ties with China, while his ministers are being asked if Michael Ma should be expelled from caucus. Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Michael Ma's fourth attempt at an apology after this, posted on X yesterday. Today, during an exchange with a witness at the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology, I asked questions that inadvertently came across as dismissive of the serious issue of forced labor. To be clear, my line of questioning referred to auto manufacturing in Shenzhen, China, not Xinjiang. I regret this mistake and apologize to Ms. McQuaig-Johnston and my fellow committee members. I condemn forced labor in all its forms. Canada has amongst the most rigorous forced labor import laws in the world, and I'm proud to support the government's work to eradicate forced labor from supply chains and enforce Canada's import prohibition. He still can't directly say that he condemns the forced labor in China, probably because he doesn't want to admit that. But it was nice to see that CTV actually afforded Ms. McQuaig-Johnston the opportunity to fully expand on her answers that Mr. Ma didn't want her to at committee.
Last question then is, you claim about forced labor in Shenzhen. Have you witnessed this yourself? Have you been there ever?
I've been to China many times.
Have you witnessed
since
forced labor in
1979?
Shenzhen? Have you witnessed forced... Just a short answer. Have you witnessed forced labor in Shenzhen? Yes or no? So did you get that
I
from
work closely with Human Rights Watch, where researchers did witness it.
So thank you.
Welcome back to Power Play. That was a snippet of an exchange in a parliamentary committee this afternoon where Liberal MP Michael Ma, who joined the governing party after defecting from the Conservatives in December, pressed a witness if she has personally witnessed forced labor in China. That exchange has garnered growing reaction on Parliament Hill. With me now is that witness herself, Margaret McQuaig-Johnston. She's a board director at the China Strategic Risk Institute and senior fellow at the Institute for Science, Society and Policy at the University of Ottawa. Hi, Margaret. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
I appreciate it. What was going through your mind as you were on the receiving end of those questions?
Well, I could see Mr. Ma was using a tactic to try to force me to say the wrong answers to flash questions, really quick questions. And I think he didn't research it very well, and so the answers that I was giving were not the answers that he wanted. And one of the questions was quite bizarre, and I didn't even think he was expecting an answer. It was such an unusual question. He asked me, have you ever seen forced labor in China? And I looked around at the rest of the committee as if to say, is he kidding? Nobody can go from the West and see forced labor in China. They would not give you access. And he also said, are you a scientist? And I said, no, but I started to say I spent 37 years in government in science and technology policy and programs and funding, and I have a master's of international relations focused on China. I look at China through the lens of technology, but he tried to cut me off, and I was able to say that later during the meeting.
Why do you think I know you said you think it's a tactic, but the government has a position on forced labor. They have a position on Uyghurs. We've gone through this debate in the House of Commons. What he was saying appears to run counter to what many other members of the governing parties say. What do you think the objective was?
I think he was expecting that I was going to criticize the government's policy on bringing 70,000 Chinese EVs to Canada. And I do have a problem with that because Human Rights Watch has published a report just in 2024 saying that dozens of parts of Chinese EVs, including those from Western companies, Tesla, Volkswagen, Toyota, and GM products, contain aluminum from Uyghur forced labor, and he didn't know about the report, I think. And after the meeting, I gave him a copy, my own copy of the report, and he said to me, "I don't believe in reports. I don't believe in anything I can't see for myself." And he said, "You and I should go to China to see if we can see Uyghur forced labor." And I said to him, "They would never show you Uyghur forced labor. The only people who see it are the ones on the ground in China who are being subjected to it. And I've been sanctioned by China for my work on the Uyghurs, including forced labor and other issues related to the Uyghurs, bringing Uyghurs from other countries to Canada. And clearly, I think he overplayed his hand. He overplayed the tactic, and the other members of the committee could see very clearly what he was trying to do.
It seems we have an admission from Michael Ma that he doesn't believe in forced labor in China. Because he says, "I don't believe in reports. I don't believe in anything I can't see." Okay. Case closed. Mr. Ma does not believe in forced labor in China. I'll believe this lady over him. That's for darn sure. So, isn't that interesting? Maybe that's why he won't say that he condemns forced labor in China, because he doesn't believe in it, by his own admission to this lady. And it's interesting to get her full take on this, right? We heard a little bit about committee, but we didn't really have the time to really dig into that. But it's interesting to note that she has been sanctioned by China. What do you have to say about that, Mark Carney? China sanctioning our academics for just telling the truth. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? So, anyway, as we move on, we get into a story that was published today by the Canadian Press. Hodgson defers questions on Michael Ma to Prime Minister, who cancelled media availability. Energy Minister Tim Hodgson said today the federal government is opposed to forced labor, a day after another Liberal MP cast doubt on China's labor practices. On Thursday, Michael Ma apologized after appearing to question, he didn't appear to question, he did question, reports of human rights abuses in China while engaging with a witness at a parliamentary committee hearing earlier in the evening. It was actually earlier in the day, but, we won't mince words. Speaking to reporters in Markham, Ontario today, Hodgson deferred questions on whether Ma should remain in the party's caucus to Prime Minister Mark Carney, even though Carney cancelled a press conference planned for today. Hodgson also says Ma acknowledged his views did not reflect the views of the Liberal Party. Isn't that interesting? Ma made no such acknowledgement in the apology posted to his social media or in his statement to the Canadian Press. Hodgson was reported to be involved in courting Ma to cross the floor to the Liberals from the Conservatives in December. Couple interesting things in there. Surprised that Hodgson said that. Number one, Mark Carney said that they weren't courting people. They were just standing there minding their own business and people came knocking on the door. So that's interesting. We all know what happened, but it's interesting to see this admitted in an actual media article. The other part that was interesting is they say that or Hodgson says that Ma had said that his views don't necessarily express those of the Liberal Party. What party do you think they actually express? That is just crazy that Hodgson would say that, because what are Canadians supposed to think? And again, this is the big issue. When the Liberals ended up later in that committee trying to take out the words of in China to globally in terms of condemning forced labor, holy crap. That doesn't sound like just the views of Michael Ma. Sounds like the other Liberals in that committee are trying to move the goalposts on this, just like Michael Ma tried to. Just like he tried to when the CBC was chasing after him. Just like he tried to in his apology, where he specifically did not condemn forced labor in China. Fascinating. Now, normally, this is where the video would end. However, we found some more information that is very, very interesting. So this is posted on X. Luke D. Pulford, state media now praising MP Michael Ma's attack on Margaret McQuaid Johnson. So this is all in simplified Chinese. Thankfully, we can translate that. Canadian scholar hyped up the issue of quote-unquote forced labor, prompting a Canadian MP to interrogate him. Now, this is just the translation, so don't read too much into this. Quote, have you ever been to China? Have you ever really seen it? End quote. Have you ever seen forced labor in China with your own eyes? Have you been there? Just say yes or no. On March 26th local time, at a hearing held by the Canadian Parliament's Industry Committee, Liberal MP Michael Ma's barrage of questions suddenly created a tense atmosphere, and his stammering, I think this means her stammering responses caused an uproar. The hearing, which was originally focused on adjustments to Canada's policy on electric vehicles from China, was quickly steered off course by controversy over alleged forced labor in Chinese car manufacturing. Ma Rongjiang, that's Michael Ma, was born in Hong Kong with ancestral roots to Guangzhou. He recently defected from the Conservative Party to the ruling Liberal Party last December. The person he questioned was Margaret McQuaid Johnson, a senior research fellow at the University of Ottawa who holds the title of quote-unquote China expert. At the hearing, Ma Rongjiang launched a barrage of questions at Margaret. Notice how this sounds a lot different than what actually happened. He pressed the other person relentlessly about whether they possessed an advanced degree in cybersecurity, whether their institution had fabricated the quote-unquote China risk, and finally cut to the chase. Quote, have you ever witnessed forced labor? Have you ever been there? Or are you just relying on hearsay? End quote. Faced with repeated questioning, Margaret was clearly taken aback. Quote, I have visited China many times since 1979, end quote. Before she could finish speaking, Ma Rongjiang interrupted her. Quote, just tell me simply, have you seen any forced labor in Shenzhen? End quote. Yes or no? Sigh. Margaret looked helpless and troubled. She frowned, paused for a full 4 seconds, and then reluctantly answered, quote, I work closely with Human Rights Watch, and they have, quote unquote, witnessed the situations firsthand, end quote. Michael Ma responds, okay, thank you. And he concluded the question briskly. Margaret admitted she was, quote unquote, stunned when asked the question. Clearly, Margaret has subtly admitted that she has never witnessed the so-called, quote-unquote, forced labor firsthand, and that it was merely hearsay. In a post-meeting interview with the Canadian press, Margaret began to realize her mistake and attempted to make excuses. She complained that she was indeed, quote-unquote, stunned by Ma Rongjiang's questions and accused him of, quote-unquote, joking because, quote, no Westerner can go to China and witness forced labor firsthand. They would never let you get close to such places, end quote. She also feigned grievance, claiming that Ma Rongjiang wanted to damage her reputation quote unquote, but I think he failed. Margaret also revealed that after the hearing, she proactively handed Ma Rongjiang a, quote, human rights report, but he replied, I don't believe in reports. I only believe in what I see with my own eyes, end quote. And even suggested that the two of them go to China together to see whether there was forced labor. However, Margaret said helplessly that she had been sanctioned by China and could no longer enter China. The so-called quote-unquote forced labor accusation has long been an absurd lie fabricated by certain Western forces based on ideological bias. It has long been divorced from facts and lacks empirical evidence, yet it has been repeatedly used to smear China. The controversy arises against the backdrop of Canada's delicate position in the US-China rivalry, where it attempts to balance economic interests with its political stance. The Carney government's easing of tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles is seen as a pragmatic move to ease trade tensions between Canada and China, but it has also drawn accusations of quote-unquote appeasement from the domestic opposition. Thus, Margaret, as an expert witness, was once again thrust into the spotlight, becoming cannon fodder in the attack on China. The reason for saying again is that this person has repeatedly acted as an anti-China pawn in public under the guise of a so-called expert. Her early research focused on practical areas such as Sino-Canadian scientific and technological cooperation, but she later turned to smearing and attacking China's so-called human rights issues, especially making a big fuss about Xinjiang and Tibet, becoming a notorious hardliner on China in Canada with a long list of bad deeds. Okay. We think our media is bad. That is how a state-supportive newspaper and media outlet in China views what happened yesterday with Michael Ma and his attack and denial of forced labor in China. So, Mr. Carney, you have Chinese state outlets effectively celebrating, and I would even say promoting Michael Ma as a hero for standing up against this mean Western propaganda that has the gall to actually tell everybody the truth that there's forced labor in China. This is something else. And I think the longer this goes on, I think the longer Mark Carney is going to have a problem having this guy in caucus. Now, what is that going to mean? So, if Mark Carney kicks him out of caucus, he's down a seat, and Michael Ma sits as an independent. So what now? Michael Ma's not going to like that. Michael Ma likes the attention. The whole point, and he admitted this on an interview, the whole point in actually defecting over to the Liberals was so he could gain access to the Prime Minister and gain access to government. Well, if he's ousted from caucus, he doesn't have any of that anymore. And then what happens? Is he going to resign his position? Because otherwise, he's just going to be sitting there in obscurity. No one's going to pay any attention to him. And he's not going to have the access that he actually wanted. So what now? Does he resign? Does a by-election come? Or does he just no longer show up in Parliament and collect a paycheck and do whatever he wants? Maybe that's what he ends up doing. But regardless, this is not a very pretty situation for Mark Carney going forward. He has this... he has a lot of rotten apples in the bunch, but just stick with me on this one. He has an extremely rotten apple in his caucus now. And that is just going to continue to decompose and ferment and stink. And it is going to be a blemish on this government going forward. Now, the issue he's going to have is, what if Michael Ma is his tie to China? What if Michael Ma is really the linchpin there? Is this going to be the scandal that eventually takes down this government? Who knows? But one thing that we do know is it's not going to get any better.